Well, hello, and welcome to Trash with a capital T, where we give trashy books and movies the love they truly deserve. And some deserve more than others. So, this is my fourth Left Behind the Kids video. I made it through four of these books. Don't know how, but I have. And if this is your first time here when it comes to the Left Behind the Kids series, actually head over to my channel, check out my playlist. I'm not going to be doing a ton of recap of the previous three books. So if you want to know more about what's going on with that plot, what there is of plot, check out those videos. I go into more detail also about like the authors and how I handle purchasing these books and stuff like that over there as well. But if you're gonna stick around over here, just know I am not a Christian. I'm not a believer, but I am coming at these books not to make fun or to make fun of the books or to make fun of Christianity. I'm here to see if they work as entertainment. Are these books entertaining? Because even Christian audiences deserve to have entertaining material that speaks to them and their beliefs. Some of the stuff in this book, particularly this one, might sound a little outlandish, and there is something I actually do find quite funny, and I will explain why. But like I said, my goal here is not to be mean or cruel. I want everyone to have fun as I go through this crazy journey of reading these books. Okay, so let's get going. Let's get back to Judd, Vicky, Ryan, and Lionel. This is book 4, Facing the Future, subtitle, Preparing for Battle. General review, this book is a step down after the last one. The last one was really exciting. This one is just a lot of plot dump, prophecy dump, more to be more accurate. So when we left off in the last book, Lionel and Judd were trying to save Lionel's uncle Andre, who had been shot by a drug dealer named Leroy. They were not able to save him, but it was this big exciting scene as they're leaving. They're trying to drag him out of this burning apartment building. But what ends up happening is after Andre dies, Judd and Lionel meet a Chicago cop named Tom Fogarty. And Tom works with the kids to try and set up a sting operation to trap Leroy and his associates, who are Cornelius, or as they call him, Connie, and Cornelius' sister, who is also Andre's fiance, Talia. And she's a character we actually met in the last book. We spent some good time with her. Her storyline kind of gets resolved here, kind of. I don't know if there's going to be more with her, but we'll get into it. The sting operation happens at the beginning of the book. Vicky and Judd are there. It happens really fast. It's not as exciting as what was going on in the last book, but it's fun. We wrapped up that plot line, and we're kind of move on. Afterwards, the kids are hanging out with the cops, and they're getting to know everybody, and we are introduced. Obviously, we learn more about Tom. We are also introduced to a younger cop named Eddie, and Eddie kind of connects with the kids because he's interested in their beliefs. When they're asked, like, what do you think happened? Why do you think everyone vanished? They're very honest, and they say they believe that it was the rapture, that Jesus came and took everybody. And it strikes Eddie's interest. And they take that as kind of like, oh, we might possibly be able to save his soul. But Eddie really doesn't stick around for long. They move him off the page, and really we focus on Tom. So plans are made so that Tom can come over to Judd's house, and he is going to bring his wife, Josie. Josie is someone who they describe as very spiritual. So the kids' beliefs, they think, would be right up her alley. And they bring her in. I'm going to kind of jump around on the plots a little bit because this goes a little soap opera-esque with it, where we have a lot of different plots kind of overlapping, but nothing really happens. So the dinner with Tom and Josie. Josie is a new favorite character of mine. She's this big, larger-than-life woman. She comes in. She's instantly in mom mode. She cooks everyone dinner. She's very nice to the kids. She is just kind of like this beam of light for the kids in this kind of screwed up world. And her story is pretty simple. We do get some backstory. So Tom is her second husband. She was married previously and she had 2 kids. Those 2 kids were raptured. This is where we get into the age of accountability, which in this book is established at like 11. For those not familiar, age of accountability is the age where and it changes from denomination to denomination, but it's this idea that you are not responsible for your decision making until you have the mental capacity to understand what you are doing. So this book establishes it around 11-ish, with Ryan being left behind, being the youngest of the four. He's 12. So her children were raptured. And part of the reason she is kind of drawn to Christianity right now is because she understands that if she accepts Jesus, she'll be able to see her kids in heaven again. And this is a very sweet notion. The dialogue that is used to discuss this, specifically coming from her husband Tom, is terrible. It is so clunky. All of these characters, the kids included, sound so old and antiquated. It is one of those things. It is common with YA books from this time period, regardless of religious background, because the writers were so much older than their intended audiences. So I was a teenager when this came out. I did not talk like any of these kids talk to. Like, they all talk like they're in their 50s. And I'm not saying we were all swearing, because I was, a relatively good kid. Christian grade schools and high schools. So I wasn't the most foul-mouthed little punk, and I still didn't talk like this. Like, we're 2 steps away from aw shucks. So, yeah. But in general, I like the character of Josie, and I think the scenes with her, and specifically Vicky, as she kind of talks about her beliefs and her religious background and just who she is as a person, those scenes are quite sweet, and we do get some decent development for Josie. Not all of the new characters get a lot of development, but luckily she does. I hope she sticks around. We also get a good chunk of time with Tom, because during the dinner, there is a phone call. Tom is called back in. An officer has been shot, because during the prisoner transfer for Leroy and his business partner Cornelius, there was a shootout, and while Cornelius gets his ears shot off, Eddie, the officer we met earlier, is shot in the face. And he is in the hospital, and he is not doing well, so Tom has to go and be with his fellow officers. Judd decides to come along because he felt a connection to Eddie, and he wanted to see if there was a chance he could talk to him. This is actually where we get probably the heaviest part of the book, because as Judd and Tom are in the car, they get into a discussion because Tom seems very hesitant, even though he's not hesitant for his wife, Josie, to accept Jesus or to talk about Christianity. Tom is very hesitant to have anything to do with religion. And he does get into it. It's mainly, he was a homicide cop, and he had seen some of the most horrible stuff in the world, and it is hard to make peace with everything he's seen, the horrors he has seen, with the idea of a loving God who would allow it. And that's a heavy thing to drop on a kid, and it's a heavy thing to drop on the readers, and they don't give a clear, simple answer, which I do appreciate, because it's not, if you are a believer, that's not a simple answer. Now, a lot of people would just say the simple answer is the devil, but if you really get into it with a lot of people and really break it down, there's probably more to it. But Judd is not really in the position where he can have that discussion, especially because he's also kind of worried about Eddie. They get to the hospital, Eddie passes away. And now Judd is also dealing with the weight of not knowing where Eddie landed. Because obviously, when I talk about this stuff, if I talk about heaven, hell, all of that, in this book, those things are real. Those places are real. To these characters, they are real. So when Judd is having the weight of Eddie's death laid on him, he is wondering if he missed the chance and if Eddie is in hell. Which is, that's a lot to put on a child. And some of the stuff that these books would put on kids is quite traumatizing. I say that word a lot in this series, but these books were, and that is a lot of weight to put on a kid. Could you imagine being like, well, you better make sure you convert them, because if you don't, what if they end up in hell? What if they're in hell? What if your parents, your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, if you don't save them, you're the reason they go to hell? You not trying enough is the reason they go to hell. That is the weight that is put on Judd after Eddie dies. Okay, so those are those stories. Lionel has a little side story. So Talia, Andre's fiance, is arrested in this, kind of adjacent to the sting as part of it. And she talks to Lionel, and there's two things that she wants. She wants to talk to him about Jesus, because left behind. She also needs an attorney. because she is facing some fairly serious legal issues. So there was, I got to put this down because I'm also kind of like half working. Also, my shoulder is killing me. There's a lot of stuff. Leroy is a drug dealer. Andre was a drug addict. So there's a lot that goes into the whole that thing. But the basic thing is Lionel and Pastor Bruce, who is another major character. He is kind of like the adult leader of this group of kids. They go to the jail. They talk to Talia. She accepts Jesus. They say they're going to get her a lawyer. I liked Talia in the last book. She's a harder character. Like, she's got an edge to her. This book, the kind of writer is a stereotypical angry black woman, and I didn't love that at all. I think it was done intentionally to make her look like she's harder in prison, like she's trying to like seem more tough while she's in jail. There's better ways you could have done that. Just saying. It's very 90s, and again, it's not just a Christian fiction thing. This was a common problem in YA books in 1999 and 2000. These little things. You see the same problem when you were reading Christopher Pike or R.L. Stine. R.L. Stine, not so much, because he really didn't have a lot of characters of color in his books at the time. So I'm not just putting that on this because it's Christian literature. I'm putting on it because it's 90s YA literature. Although there are other characters of color in this book who are handled, specifically Lionel, who are handled pretty well. I was worried about Lionel from the first book, but he's developed into an actual character. And his scenes with Pastor Bruce in this book and with Talia, I mean, he has this very hard edge, but you see that this kid cares, and he does want to save Talia. Because, like I said, in this book, to these people especially, but in this book, heaven and hell are very real, and if you die, and there's a good chance you will, you could end up in the fiery pits of hell. So I understand the worry about that, and he does care for Talia, and it is quite sweet. The other thing that kind of comes up with Pastor Bruce is after they're done, and he's talking to Lionel, again, we get this doubt of the sincerity of someone's conversion. Now, there are two reasons that I think this is here. One is the version I'm going to go with, and this is the nicer character building version, is that Pastor Bruce, because he was a pastor, he thought he would have been saved. He thought his conversion, his belief in Jesus was sincere. But obviously it wasn't, because he's still on the earth. So he's always questioning if he did it right, if the other person is saved, if they really mean it. Because if he didn't really truly mean it, did they really mean it? So that's a weight he always carries with him. The non-character building version of this, the less forgiving version of this, is going to definitely be that they are doing that. Are you sure? Are you really sure? Well, maybe you need to say it again. So how about you try again? Are you really, really sure? Well, you did this thing, so maybe it outdid it. And that kind of like, you always have to be on, make sure. This book also, and this is not just in this book, it's in the other books too. There's a very formal take on accepting Christ that I'm not familiar with. Like I said, at Christian high schools, grade schools, it was definitely a more informal experience back then. In this book, it's very much, I have to remember the verses. There are specific verses that I have to say because the details in those verses are very important. And if you don't know it, then it's not going to be real. It is very formal. It is almost ritual. But I think part of that isn't necessarily that they believe that's how someone gets saved. I think it's because they're trying to give it gravitas within the story. And that I do understand, because the decision in this book, these characters, the point of this is to save souls. It's not to defeat the Antichrist. It is convert people to Christianity, to save them so that during the tribulation, if they die, they go to heaven. That is just something to keep in mind when you're reading these. These are very much evangelizing books. They're about evangelizing. So if that is something that bothers you or is uncomfortable for you, or if you have religious OCD and it's triggering for you, maybe skip these. But that is definitely a big part of these. But yeah, so that kind of wraps up the narratives that we go through. The rest of the book, the kids are called to New Hope Church, the church that Pastor Barnes works at. And we get prophecy dump. So a lot of it is because Vicky, is questioning if Nicolae Carpathia is really the Antichrist. So we get a lot of the stuff that kind of establishes him as, yes, he is going to be the Antichrist. He is not yet. So that is one of the things. Well, he is and he isn't. So there's an event that has to happen for him to actually fully take in the devil. And that is, he sustains a head injury and appears to die, but when he revives, he will be fully taken over by Satan. That has not happened yet. We're in the very early stages. But he does seem to have this power to make people trust him. And Pastor Barnes goes through all the stuff that Nicolae is talking about, that is kind of like, this is what the prophecy is saying the Antichrist is going to do, which is mainly, he comes from a Roman background. He's from Romania. He was the president of Romania. He has a Roman lineage. He is making moves to become the head of the UN. He has a plan to demilitarize everybody. Everyone destroys their weapons, gives 10% to the UN. So the UN becomes the one world superpower. They control everything. That also includes establishing a one world religion. This is all stuff I had grown up knowing, like as part of the prophecy, the theory, the story. I knew this part. There are other things that we're going to get to that I was not familiar with that definitely made me go, huh? Come again? Okay. So this is all of the standard stuff. There's going to be a mark. They're changing the currency. They're going to go to a one world currency. That type of stuff that most people are familiar with when it comes to the idea of the rapture and Left Behind specifically. Then we get into more of the general prophecy. And one of the biggies that comes up involves Israel. So there's two things. One, the tribulation has not started yet. It will when Nicolae signs a peace treaty with Israel. The other is that there will be two prophets that will show up at the Wailing Wall, two Jewish men who are at the Wailing Wall preaching the word of Christ. And these two, we don't meet them as characters, we meet them more as concepts. But this is the introduction of Eli and Moishi into the story. That is their names. And they are supposed to be preaching for the first third of the tribulation. They cannot be harmed. They actually have magic powers to keep them from being harmed. Those powers are, they can control the weather, they can turn the rain to blood, and they can breathe fire. So we have been introduced to fire-breathing Jews. They really don't do much. We just hear about them. Now, I'm going to tell you right now why I find this very funny. Their names specifically. There's a podcast called God Awful Movies that covers religious films. Not just Christian, but religious in general. And they covered the Left Behind movies. And they thought the fire-breathing Jews were hilarious because they're in the film and you do see them breathing fire. But they don't have names in the film. The name of one of the guys on the podcast is Eli Bosnick. One of their regular co-hosts is Moishi. So every time I read their names, I'm like, that's what those guys are up to now. Because they haven't listened to the podcast for a while. So I'm like, oh, okay. You guys have a role. Yeah. So we kind of get the big prophecy dump. That's a really highlighted version of it. There is a lot more. I mean, it is like 30 pages of prophecy. Whew. Going off of that, then the kids are still like, well, we need to know more. So he's like, okay, I know someone you could talk to who has met Nicolae, who has been in the room with him. And we are now introduced to Buck Williams, who is a major character in the adult books. And Buck shows up and he tells the kids about being in this big UN meeting with Nicolae. And during the meeting, Buck becomes saved. Because what happens is Nicolae basically mesmerizes the entire room, takes a gun off a guard, and shoots his friend in the head, like another, I think he's a UN ambassador or something. Shoots him in the head, and then makes it look like he shot himself in the head and then killed the man behind him. So double whammied. A lot of people get shot in the head in this book. A lot of people. But this also establishes one of the biggest problems I have with this specific book. And it's something that kind of has crept in a lot in this series, where it's a lot of telling, not showing. Put these kids in more interesting experiences. Don't just sit them down and lecture them or tell them stories about what has already happened. Figure out ways to make them more incorporated. The kids are way too passive in this book. A lot of the action happens with the adults. Now, some of this might be because they are hesitant to include the kids in some of the more violent aspects of these stories. I get that you are dealing with children. As violent as these books are, a lot of it happens off page and we hear about it. The only time I think, no, Andre was shot off page too. He dies on page, but he was shot off page. But I do understand that, but find other things. That's why the last book worked. By having Judd and Lionel involved in the action, it raised the stakes. It made it more interesting. Ryan was involved in the action. He was spying on Leroy and Cornelius in the house. Like, there's stuff that the kids were doing. Here, it's more just talking. Now, a lot of that is because this is set up. This is almost all, it's a prophecy dump. 30 pages of this book is just establishing the prophecy that is going to play out once the peace treaty is signed. But you still could have found ways to make this more exciting. Now, I read this in about an hour and a half, hour maybe. So it's not like it was a slog to get through, but the story doesn't feel like it went anywhere. It feels stagnant. Now, I have heard the next book is quite fun. That is Nikolai High. But I'm still struggling with the fact that they can't find that balance between storytelling and kind of bringing in the religious education aspect of it. You have to find that balance, because if you don't, you're going to lose your reader. I'm going to put this down because I'm going to go into more general, just what I've experienced with going through Christian literature so far. And I'm actually looking at another series. I started reading it. Another YA series from the same time called Forbidden Doors. This is the first book, The Society, by Bill Myers. And if you were in the world of evangelical Christians or specifically non-denominational Christians, you'll know that name. He is one of the creators of McGee and Me. He also wrote a series of books, the Wally McDougall books, that were very popular when I was in grade school. Because I had never heard about him, and I transferred to a Christian grade school, and everyone went nuts for these books. That is books with titles like My Life as Alien Monster Bait. Say that one slowly. Don't say it too fast. My Life as a Broken Bungee Cord. My Life as Crocodile Junk Food. My Life as Dinosaur Dental Floss. And My Life as a Torpedo Test Target. I do eventually want to check those out, but if I do, I want to make sure I get the good covers, not the new ones. So he is a very familiar name within Christian literature because he has also written books for adults. So far, this book is actually entertaining. Like, I get what they're going for. This is more spiritual warfare over, end times. But it's balancing the storytelling better. The Left Behind books, both adult books and kids books, because I'm reading one of the adult books now too. I'm reading the first book of the prequels. They don't understand that balance. And this is the same problem we had with the first book. I know I talked about it at length there, so I'm not going to go into it too much. The third book felt like they found that balance. With this book, it feels like a step back. We are more comfortable with the characters, and the characters are definitely more fleshed out, which is a positive. Also, some of the newer characters that have been brought to us, specifically with Tom and Josie, they are likable characters, and they are becoming deeper compared to some of the just shallow, like here's an adult. Like Leroy, Cornelius, even Andre were really caricatures and kind of offensive ones. Because outside of Lionel, those were our majority black characters. But all that aside, because that wasn't just a Christian fiction problem, that was a 90s problem. That was an early 2000s problem. And I see that in all of these books, Christian or non. So I'm not going to call these books out for that specifically. I'm just going to call it the genre at the time. But, and there was another whole new character I forgot to even mention. So they do get Talia a lawyer. Her name is Beth Murray. She shows up, gives her testimony, says she'll take the case, and then she's gone. That scene could have been in a totally different book. Didn't need it. I think they did it because they specifically wanted her testimony. Her testimony involves her husband vanishing. He was raised Jewish. He was culturally Jewish, but never really religious. And then eventually he converted to Christianity, but joined a Messianic synagogue, which I believe blends Jewish tradition with Christianity and with the belief of Christ as being the Savior. And his entire synagogue vanished. And that's what brought her to Christ. And I think that brings her into the story. Or it brings that aspect into the story, because a big part of this is also the conversion of Jews to Christianity. that's where I'm going to circle back to Moshe and Eli because I got distracted by the funny part. So Moshe and Eli open this whole other aspect of the story, which is the 144,000 prophets. So these two are going to be, Moshe and Eli are at the Wailing Wall, preaching the word of Christ, breathing fire, turning the water, the rain to blood, all of that. They will survive the first third of the tribulation. Then they will be assassinated, and their assassination will be seen by the world, most likely on TV. Once they have been assassinated, that will cause a mass conversion within the Jewish community, and you will have 144,000 prophets that are Jewish converts who will go spread the word of Christ throughout the world to save all of these souls. So a big part of this is also the idea of a mass conversion from Judaism to Christianity. For some, that might be a problem to, like, that story aspect or that prophecy aspect might be a problem. I always kind of knew that was in there. It's definitely something that gets talked about a lot in the adult book. The fire-breathing Jews were there. I just didn't remember their names. But yeah, the prophecy stuff definitely makes you stop and go, okay, we need to explore this more. It's not, don't like just completely, dismiss it. I mean, but explore, why is this all here? And it does get into kind of the importance of Israel within this end time prophecy specifically, which kind of raises some interesting questions. And if you explore it more, it also kind of helps understand how certain things within our current political landscape are shaped from this belief. Not going to get into that too much because it starts getting into hinky territory. And I want this to be a fun place. I talk politics everywhere else in my real life. Here, I want to have fun talking about goofy books. Okay. So the kids meet Buck, but the book ends, and we're set up for them eventually going back to school in the next book, which is going to be a state-run school called the book is called Nikolai High. I don't know what the school's actually going to be called, but it's the idea that the government is taking over. The new government, the one world government, is taking over and is setting up establishments. They're also going to be setting up a new headquarters in New Babylon. Where New Babylon came from, when it happened, no clue, but it's there. Okay. So that is wrapping up the fourth Left Behind the Kids book. Do I think this book is good? No. Do I think it is terrible? No. I think the storytelling within these books really, really needs a lot of work. That doesn't mean you take out the religious aspects or the Christian aspects or even like the prophecy parts. It means you find ways to naturally work them into the story so it feels like something natural for the reader. Because my problem is it doesn't feel natural to stop the book and go into a lesson for 30 pages. That is how you lose your audience. I'm just putting that out there. Find ways to integrate that information naturally into the narrative. That is interesting stuff that you can work in and make compelling. As it is written now, it is not. It is the same problem they had when the rapture happened off page while all the characters slept in the first book. We're backsliding. Now, I have heard the next couple books do get more fun, although there's someone warned me in my comment on my first video that books, I think 9 through 11 are mostly filler, so I'm not looking forward to those, but I'm still going to read them. But it's almost weird talking about this because the length of this series, it almost feels like you're talking about a large, like multi-season anime series where they have these big story arcs. But this one just happens to have people getting whisked off to heaven naked. Okay, guys, I'm going to wrap this up here because I'm starting to make the jokes. I think my brain is getting a little tired. But yeah, I mean, I'm still enjoying reading these. I'm going to continue reading them. Nothing has happened with these where I'm just like, oh, hell no, no more. It may. I definitely know the adult book I'm reading has not gotten there, but it's definitely like walked up to that line because that book introduces a gay couple. Not just like hints at it, like they are full on a gay couple. And I don't think they know how to write them. It's quite interesting. Okay, so just the general housekeeping. New videos here, Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time every Sunday morning. Something new is released. I'm probably going to be doing the fifth book is probably going to be December. So, for the Left Behind books, Left Behind the Kid books, we're going to do one a month. That's just how I'm aiming. I might miss a month. Life happens. I work in a business that kind of has big seasonal spikes, so I'm trying to get ahead enough where when we get into the season, I can't record. I still got plenty of stuff for you guys. Alrighty. Keep loving what you love, enjoying what you're reading and watching. I'm going to add a little something here. Be kind to one another. It's not easy out there for anybody. Things are kind of tough. So spreading a little love never hurts. All right. Have an amazing morning, afternoon, and evening. And I will see y'all in the next one. Bye.